Hey guys, I'll have Scott Hammontree here with us and ask Scott to come and share a story with all of you that he shared with me yesterday. And I think it really tells a lot and it reminds us that we don't have to necessarily settle for the first thing we see, that if we are thoughtful and have a good relationship with our buyers and sellers, that we can really overcome what could seem to be a very difficult transaction and end up with a great closing and a happy buyer and a great testimonial. So, Scott, I'm going to ask you to tell me the story of this
Sure.
transaction that you did here recently. And I'm going to ask you to start by telling me, how did this buyer find you?
It started, I received a phone call and she introduced herself on the phone and we chatted for a little bit. And I asked her, I said, "How did you get my name?" And she said, "What's interesting, I went on the Cressy and Everett website and I started looking for agents and I come across yours website and I was reading some of your testimonials and I decided I want to work with you." So, you know what? I got the call. It was awesome. And we started the hunt looking for some houses. And I found 4 houses. One of those was under contract. And we went and looked at the other 3. And it was on a Saturday afternoon. And the third house we got to, let me back up 1 second. That one of those 3 listings happened to be a listing that was listed by one of these services that all they do is you pay a flat fee and they list the property for the seller.
A limited services brokerage is what we call them
Correct.
sometimes.
Correct. So red flag goes up. I call the phone number on the listing. Sure enough, they give me a number and they say, "You have to call the seller direct down in Tennessee, schedule all your showings with them, and we're just a listing service." And that's exactly what they told me. So I phoned the sellers and they're very cooperative. And I got in the house that Saturday and I was joking with the buyer and I said, this was the third house. And I said, "This is just like HGTV." I said, "I've shown you 3 houses. Which one do you want?" And she said, "Actually, it's this one." She said, "You sent
As
me
it turned
this."
out.
She said, "You sent me this, but I saw this online and it's absolutely fell in love with it. It's the one I wanted to go see." So it worked out nice. Lo and behold, we put an offer in a couple days later and then all the fun started. But before I put that offer in, I warned her, this is one of those properties the seller listed with an online service. There's going to be a lot of extra work on my part. And I
And
said,
Scott,
"Oh,
and that's so important because that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to tell the story. Because
sure,
as an agent working with a buyer, when you come across a property like that and you understand what it is, we can react a couple of different ways, right? We know it's going to be a little bit different. We know it's going to be more difficult, all those things. Your attitude towards that seller regarding that property makes all the difference, right? Because you could say, "Oh my God, this is going to be impossible. This is not going to work. Don't get excited about so on and so forth," right?
right.
And in a way, we may not be doing the best service for our buyers if we take that approach. No, that's not what you did. You explained what was slightly different about this situation and that you were going to have to work a little differently, and then you went about doing it.
Yeah. And in fact, to the point, my comment to her was past experience on these. I'm going to end up doing most of the work for the seller as well. I can pretty much tell you, I already found that out. I had to call them to set up the showing. It all started just like I thought it would. And I said, "If this is the one you decide to put an offer in on, I'm going to ask you to amend our buyer's agency agreement contract. I'm going to ask for 4% because I can tell you it's going to be a lot of extra work." She said, "I have no problem with that." She was fine with it. And when we wrote the offer, I wrote in 4% buyer agency commission, submitted it to the sellers. Then we found out the day we submitted the offer that the seller had another offer, a contingent offer that was not in the MLS. As far as in the MLS, it just said active. So the seller phones me back. He goes, "I've got another offer, but there's a first right of refusal. They have 72 hours. What do I need to do?" And I said, "First thing you need to do is you need to send an email to the buyer's agent that has that offer that you already have and start the clock. Let him know you've accepted another offer. He has 72 hours." So that was helpful. I basically walked him through what he needed to do to get that contingency release. And I said, make sure you get a mutual release signed after the 72 hours. And sure
And
enough,
Scott, that's so classic of that tricky position that you're put in, right? As a buyer's
right,
agent, because
right.
not only are you communicating with the seller, you are borderline advising the seller. And so you did the right thing by sending them back to the listing brokerage. At the end of the day, they're really not going to provide those services. So here's a seller having to make legal decisions about how to handle offers and things like that, that they really don't understand and they're not supposed to understand. So it's a
Well,
dangerous situation to be in. You did the right thing, but we got to be super careful that we realize that we're really not working on behalf of the sellers. We're working on
absolutely.
behalf of the buyers.
And most of my communication with him in the beginning was verbal. And it was like, look, I'm not your agent. You need to do this, you need to do that. And then I even said to him, with a contingent offer, your listing service should have marked that active contingent, accepting backup offers. They didn't do. He goes, no, they didn't do that. And I said, okay, so you need to make sure you get the contingency released, the mutual release signed, and then we'll accept if you want to accept our offer. He said, absolutely, I want to accept your offer. They were very pleased with our offer. And so it was 72 hours later, we did an amendment removing the purchase agreement from backup status to an active purchase agreement. And from there, inspections, everything was coordinated through the seller, and it went really pretty smooth.
And
It's interesting though, after we're under contract and after the inspections have been ordered and all of that, I get an email from this listing service. I won't use their name. And all I wanted to know is they said, when's your closing? Can we get a copy of the purchase agreement? Who's the title company? And I was a little upset in the beginning. And I said, I'll give you the information for the title company. You're going to have to get it all through them. And after I thought about it, it's what difference does it make? I want to keep it going forward. So I instructed the title company to go ahead and release that to them. And then the title company, of course, had to ask for proof of listing. That service was actually under contract with the seller. So after that, it started to smooth out a little bit. But and by the way, they wanted a 0.25 commission on top of their $500 fee for listing it.
so that was news to us. That's
Yeah.
part of their model, but it was also news to the seller, right?
Yes. And he gets back with me and he says, what do I do with this? I said, sir, I haven't seen your listing contract. I don't know what you signed with them, but if it's in your contract, yes, you're probably obligated for that 0.25%. And sure enough, he was. But he thought he was just for a $500 fee.
Mhm.
So this service did get paid at closing. They got their 0.25%. Thankfully, the title company made them perform, made them prove they had the rights to the listing and all of that. So that was all above board. But extra work. My buyer
It
really
was.
appreciated it. But I think she saw in the end that why I told her I was going to ask for 4%, because it went very smooth. In fact, she gave me a really nice testimonial.
I see it here. Absolutely. She said,
Excuse
um,
me.
she,
We all have those thoughts when we get a situation like that with a buyer and they want to see a listing, whether it's a FSBO or one of these listing services. And my goal is to find her a house. She's in a nice price range. I like working with buyers in that $400,000 range.
that's
And
great.
quite honestly, our inventory is so low, I'm going to show her whatever I can show her.
Mhm.
And
And we generally advise our agents to not revise the BRA, right? We want you to come up with the highest commission that you can ask for when you have the BRA sign and stick to that. However, this is one of those very legitimate situations in which your duties changed. You are able to explain, given this type of transaction, you are going to have to perform additional duties. And that is one of those conditions under which rewriting the BRA is totally justified so that you can go from whatever you asked originally to that 4%. Be aware that's exactly how and when we're supposed to revise those. And you get paid a fair amount. You had to do some more work, but obviously 4% beats whatever else the seller would have thought was necessary. So
I made it crystal clear to her that if for any reason the seller didn't want to go there, didn't want to accept 4%, if he beat us up and wanted 3%, I said, I will not let you lose this house based on 1% extra commission. And I said, if I have to, we'll revise it again. But I said, I have to ask for it based on the amount of work. And she says, no, go
Made
for it,
sense.
do it. But I made it clear it wasn't going to cost her any money.
Right.
And
Okay.
it worked out.
It sure did, Scott. And that's it. That's all I wanted you to tell the story with everyone. Remind us that we're in control of these situations, and something that could look not ideal can still work out really well. Earn you a wonderful testimonial, earn you a good commission. And so, yeah, great job.
And one other thing, that seller never once brought up the commission. He was so thankful that everything kept telling me over and over, thank you so much for it. Went very smooth, about as smooth as it could go. And he didn't mind paying it.
Service and value, man. That's what it's all about. All right.
So
Thank you for sharing, Scott.
you're welcome. Have a great day.